Reverend Dr. Jack Sara is the president of Bethlehem Bible College. Born and raised in the Old City of Jerusalem, Jack studied at the Bethlehem Bible College after committing his life to Christ and his teachings in 1991. Jack went to the Philippines to study at the Alliance Biblical Seminary, AGS now, where he earned his Master of Divinity degree. Reverend Jack holds a doctorate degree from Gordon Cornwall Theological Seminary in Missions and Cross-Cultural Studies. He began serving at Bethlehem Bible College as the incoming president in 2011 and officially from 2012. He's married to Dr. Madeleine Sara, and they have 3 children, Nathan, Marantha, and Mikel. Reverend Jack Sara travels around the globe teaching about the missions and cross-cultural work in the Middle East. Together, let's all welcome Reverend Dr. Jack Sara.
Thank you. Well, it's certainly a great honor to have you all with us, be among you, fellowship with you, and have you at our home. So I want to say again, welcome and welcome and welcome. As we started this conference 2 days ago, I was not able to welcome each and every one of you. And if you know me personally, I'm an extrovert, a very extrovert, which means if I am in a room with 100 people, I have to meet each and every one of them. And you could understand now my frustration. So I would love to fellowship with you, have to talk with you, and hopefully most of you will continue to pray for Bethlehem Bible College, which is the mother of this conference, Christ at the Checkpoint, that had been one of our flagships since 2010. Founded by the college, initiated by Reverend Alex Awad, and of course endorsed by the father of the college, Dr. Bishara Awad, that I want you to recognize his presence here. By all means, and not to plug again, but Bethlehem Bible College has been the proof of the Christian witness in context of oppression. And I could talk more and more about it, but I'm sure all of you have already read, saw us, met us, heard us, supported us, prayed for us and with us. And it's our hope that you will continue to do so as you go back to your respective places with challenges, with homework that will bring fruit to God's glory and His kingdom. And as I started reflecting about sharing about this context that we're living in, I wouldn't say you've heard enough, but you've heard from my colleagues, from each speaker who stood up on this pulpit, who sat on these seats, who shared from the pews and around the workshops about the unction, the plight, the heart, the hurts, the frustrations, the sadness, the joys, the hopes of our people, the Palestinians. And this comes out of a community, a small community, that I wouldn't dare to call them minority. Because if you come to any of us Palestinian Christians, although according to any definition, we are a minority in this land, we would never call ourselves a minority. Because we're not just part and parcel of the fabrics of the society. We are here rooted as the olive tree. And although the historic region of Palestine holds place in the faith often referred to as the fifth gospel. You know, it's not far away from here where Saint Jerome that brought us the Bible into the modern languages starting with Latin, translated in a little cave under the Nativity Church where we go to pray sometimes. Brought up the scriptures so that the whole what's called today the modern world will have it, talked about our country as the fifth gospel. Because wherever you go, wherever you walk, you see some of the stories of scriptures that we have so much affinity to comes alive in our faces. And in this context, it does bring history, presence, reflections on not just the stones of the Holy Land, the sites where tourists, pilgrims, visitors come and visit and see, and they all say, oh, Jesus walked here. But Jesus did not just walk here, he left a legacy. He left a church. He left humans, people who carry his name, Christians. And despite having history and strong Christian community, many are surprised to discover that Palestine had always been, and there always been, a vibrant Christian community living here, rooted deep like the olive tree. The roots of our people, the Palestinians, and I want to go through a little brief of history. I'm not going to take much to talk about every period. But if you count from day one of Christianity, whether it is AD 33 or AD 29 or 28, I'm not going to dispute that because it's not the time to kind of talk, but we know we have a glitch in history. But for over 2,000 years, with consequent empires, rulers, authorities, coming, ruling over the land that we all call the Holy Land. Amidst everything, there has never been a period of time that Christians did not exist. Some might call my own tribe the evangelicals. Yeah, but they were Catholics, Orthodox, nominal, traditional. They were always there as a witness to what happened 2,000 years. And the roots of Palestinian Christians can be traced all the way from the first century. The apostles, disciples, whom when then were local Jews, formed the first Christian communities together with the non-Jews who converted. Yet Jerusalem and its surrounding became central to the spread of Christianity, the gospel, and the significant events such as Pentecost occurred in our country. And you could read Acts chapter 2. By the end of the first century, several Christian communities had been established in key cities, such as Jerusalem, around the Galilee, Jaffa, Caesarea, Nablus, and elsewhere. These communities were among the earliest to adopt and spread the Christian faith and the message of God's kingdom. During the Roman and the Byzantine eras, early Christians in Palestine did face a period of persecution. And despite that, they managed to thrive. And especially after Christianity became legal, after the Edict of Milan, and then you have Christians here all over the place building churches. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Madama map, which is an interesting thing to keep thinking of how Jerusalem was during the 5th and the 6th century, with churches bigger than any other structure in the midst of Jerusalem. And the only thing that happened was 614, when most of the churches were destroyed by the Persians all over the country, to the point that it was so much devastation in 2 years that took hundreds of years to rebuild what was destroyed in less than 2 years. And then we have the Islamic conquest and rule from the 7th century onward, as Christians became like a minority under the Muslim rule. However, many Christians continued to live and practice their faith, contributing to the cultural and intellectual life of the region. And then we had the Treaty of Omar, which, again, I'm not going to go deeper into dissecting and interpreting and kind of like doing parsing of if every word was there. But there was a treaty that were given to the Christian by the Muslims, the Khalifa Omar, who came basically to take Jerusalem and rule over Jerusalem together with the new rule. And you could read about it because it's too long to read it all together. But within that treaty, you could read how the Muslims who came here desired to rule over this country and keep its inhabitants, the Christians, in a way, living, practicing their faith in their churches and in their communities. And then after that conquest, we have different dynasties, ruling parties. From the Abbasid Fatimid period, Christians always had varied degrees of tolerance and hardship. And it did fluctuate, to be honest with you. Sometimes they had a great time, they thrived, and sometimes they had hard times. And we know this from history, and we cannot hide our history. And then we have the Crusaders, which is 1,000 years almost after the church was born here. And that era brought some sort of temporary Christian rule to parts of the Palestine, but also significant upheaval. And following the Crusader period, we have the Mamluks and others. And then we saw a change in Jerusalem and elsewhere around this country, where for almost 100 years, this country was Christian again. Again, the name. Were they practicing Christianity? We have to ask that question. However, local Arab Christians under Crusaders experienced a mix of hardship and adaptation. While they faced the Latinization efforts, cultural tensions, and occasional privileges, they also managed to maintain their religious and cultural identities, Eastern Orthodox identities. Still, they remained. And then you have the Mamluk rule. And under the Mamluk as well, they had to struggle to survive, to continue on their resilience, and to remain in their own land. Then we have the Ottomans, which produced and introduced the millet system. Again, I'm zipping through history. You could read all of this. It's easy and straightforward about at least the periods of time that our country had gone through. Then in this rule, which actually was the longest so far, of over 400 years, that changed the face of this country till now. I mean, wherever you go to the walls of Jerusalem, that's Ottoman. Go to a lot of the structures around this country, it's Ottoman. And Palestinian Christians under Ottoman rule experienced a period of some sort of stability because they were given some sort of an autonomy, but it did introduce some sort of fragmentation within the Christian communities. The millet system was introduced, which provided some sort of structure for Christians to maintain their religious and cultural identities. I mean, if you watch, some of you like to watch the parades, when the bishops walk, they want to come to the church and they have an entourage and someone knocking on the ground like this with a stick. That was all introduced during the Ottoman period. And we have an expert on this, soon to be, hopefully soon, Dr. Haytham, who would, if you need to ask about anything related to the history of Bethlehem, Jerusalem, and anything, go to him. He's that authority. After the Ottoman, we have who? The British. Did the Christian leave? No. Did the numbers dwindle? Always. During the British Mandate, Palestinian Christians were a small number comprising approximately of 10% of the population. They lived primarily in cities like Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Nazareth, as well as smaller towns and villages that some of them till now remain almost primarily Christian till today. The Christian churches in Palestine, including the Greek Orthodox, Latin Catholic, Anglican churches, played roles in supporting Palestinian national aspiration and advocating for the rights of Palestinians in general. So the last century alone, from the onset British control in 1922 until the end of 1947, an estimated 100,000 to 150 Palestinians, comprising only 10th, I would say more or less, had to be displaced and expelled or stripped of their national identities. This is during the British Mandate. Unfortunately, there is a concern that this community presence in Palestine till now, and we will talk more about it, may be at risk of vanishing. Just for the sake of time, I'm sorry I'm going fast a little bit, and I'll reflect on this as I will have a few minutes, and we'll have some time. I hope to have some time for Q&A where we can dig deeper, both me and May, about some of those issues. Under the occupation, it's just the description has been from catastrophe to catastrophes. My grandfather, my father, myself, my son, 4 generations so far. And our life description is always war, always catastrophes. We never had it easy. And at the wake of creation of the State of Israel, almost 50% of the Palestinian Christians became refugees or IDPs, internally displaced peoples. Community fragmentation, Israel, West Bank, Jerusalem, Gaza, and as Israel started to occupy the land bit by bit, each community, each place has been given a certain status or an identity, which our life experience might have varied from location to location, but even those of us who had an easier life still felt threatened and pushed out from place to place. Palestinian Christians, although have seen all of these authorities, imperial powers, have demonstrated always a remarkable resilience since the first century. And I'm saying this because we do talk, and we're now talking about how we are persevering in the midst of such oppressive context just within the past 76 years. But I'm putting things in much larger perspective. It has been 2,000 years. So the 76 years will not crush us. Our enduring presence and faith amidst historical and contemporary challenges highlight our strength and determination. And the word for that is, I didn't hear it. The word for that is sumud. This is our sumud. This is what we coin as sumud. Through strong bonds, deep cultural religious identity, and support from international networks like yourself, we will continue to remain. We will continue to remain. Palestinian Christians today in the West Bank and elsewhere, we don't even make up 1 to 1.5% of all the communities in this land. And as we exist with numbers that are more or less in the West Bank about 1%, in Israel about 1.6%, representing about 14 different denominations. I don't want to mention all of them and talk about it. It's going to take too long. But we have been here. And some of us, it's not that we want to talk, it's who rules. If you're in Israel, you're in Israel. If you're in Palestine, you're in Palestine. And each place has its own difficulty and challenge. And just a little note about evangelicals, because I was also asked, we as an evangelical institution here at Bethlehem Bible College, which is part of the Evangelical Council in Palestine, we have been here for over 150 years. Evangelical missions, Protestant missions started in the early 19th centuries, the Anglicans and the Lutherans and the later on Baptists, later on all sorts of American mission agencies that started sending. My own denomination, the Christian and Missionary Alliance, started in Jerusalem in 1890. But all of us, again, some of us are competing today. Who was first here? Who's the mother church? And who? Honestly, it's a hard question to ask because, whether you ask a Catholic, what were you before? Or as an Anglican, what were you before? Or Lutheran, what were you before? Or an evangelical, we are all Christians. And the Christian identity oversees, it's over everything else within our identities. If you ask a Christian today or a Palestinian Christian today, what are you? Before saying I'm a Palestinian or Israeli or an Arab or Bethlehemite, he would say you, I am a Christian. And they will not never, sometimes they will not mention the denomination to you, because their Christian identity is the most important identity that we carry. Do you agree with me, Palestinian Christians? About 200,000 in Palestine, Israel, 130,000 in Israel, 40 to 50,000 in the West Bank and Gaza, 14 churches group. But sadly, one description that I cannot hide and we will not hide and we want to protect, so that hopefully either it will remain the same or we'll bring more children so that we will learn from Shireen what to do. You know, that she has 4 kids. Our numbers will grow. But however, we are still small in numbers. Although our small percentage, yet our contribution is significant. Politically speaking, culturally speaking, literature, social, educational, and also theological. We are part of this product of how Palestinian Christians will not stay on the boundary line. We decided to cross the boundary line and move forward to provide something better for our future. Although our writing, theologizing, reading scriptures sometimes is quite challenging to some of our friends in the West, yet it comes out from our context of being oppressed for 2,000 years. Some of our writing are reactive, shaped by the conflict, narrative, liberation theology, evangelical, anti-Zionism, contextual theology, pastoral, or even missional, to the point that when they talked about which is the country that did send missionaries most among all the world, guess which country won? Believe it or not, it's Palestine. In a report done by Gordon Conwell Center for Mission Studies, they found out that Palestinian Christians, that's per capita by the way, send the most missionaries to the world. Google it, I'm not kidding. The second is Brazil. First is Palestine. We have our struggles, we're oppressed, we have difficulties, yet we opted to continue on sharing God's love locally and globally. And that's what we do. We have several initiatives. If you're part of one of those organizations, shout out Kairos, Christ at the Checkpoint, Sabil, DR, Holy Land Trust, Kremazan, Tent of Nations, Musalaha, YMCA, WIAM, and many other organizations. And forgive me if you're a Palestinian organization and I did not mention your name. But these initiatives are not brought to us from outside. There's so much indigenous, local, that shares the unctions, the hearts, our aspiration for change in our communities. I want to skip through and not talk more about this because I want to leave for Christians, but I fear, for the Christians in Gaza as well. Because, again, I'm not just singling out the Christians, but because we are supposed to suffer with those who suffer. We suffer with all the Palestinians in Gaza. But if you know anything about Gazan Christian community, we say 800 to 900 remaining, but sadly speaking, I don't know if even 700 are left today. And Yusuf could correct me, and those Christians from Gaza could correct me today, of the recent number of how many Christians remained in Gaza, with all what they saw so far in Gaza. You know, with the killing, with the bombing, with the snipers that shot elderly lady, Christians like Ilham Farah, who, when I used to visit the Baptist church in Gaza, she would sit on the piano and start playing amazing Christian songs. She was left to die on the streets of Gaza. Like these 2 precious ladies who were killed in the vicinity of the Catholic Church in Gaza. And each one of them will draw a line of how much Christians will remain in this country. So it is an existential threat, by all means. And when I highlight this important issue, I hope that you would understand that it's not that we are only afraid that this country will be deployed, will be emptied from its local Christians, because it does affect and impact the whole Holy Land if there's no Christians here. Michael Sabbah, former Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, said, "We see a continuous slow bleeding of our people. The occupation and the economic and political instability are leading our young people to seek a better future elsewhere." Sami Awad, who I'm happy to see among us, said, "The Christian presence in the land where Christianity was born is being eroded. We are witnessing a modern exodus driven by the lack of hope and opportunities." Reverend Miti Rahib said, "The Christian presence in the Holy Land is at risk. The land of Christ is becoming a museum of holy places with no living stones to keep the faith alive." I hope not. I hope your presence here will encourage our thriving, remaining sumud in our land. And I'm over time, right? So I will try to, in 1 minute, say how much we are frustrated sometimes as well with many of our fellow Christians in the West and elsewhere. I myself, as an evangelical minister, I'm jealous for our witness in such times like this. I want our message to be clear and compelling and relevant, not only to my own people, the Palestinian, but also to every other nation on this earth. After all, the image we project is how our neighbors will understand Jesus Christ. How can we call ourselves evangelicals if promoting the gospel of the love of Jesus is not our first agenda? How can we be true evangelicals if our motivation is more toward the manipulation of international politics rather than the kingdom of Jesus Christ and his centrality? And we see it. I live in Jerusalem. And the images that we see in Jerusalem from evangelicals, sometimes who come from the West and elsewhere, reflect a different reality. Guess what does it reflect? This is what our people see. And this is only a slight picture of what our people see from Christians. And I ask, where is our witness? Palestinians, especially us evangelicals, are doing our best to present the gospel of kingdom to our nation. And honestly, all the time, it draws me to declare, as I'm writing, as I'm talking, I'm an evangelical Palestinian leader, and I want to be not ashamed of my evangelical heritage. At the end, I say, we also have been working hard to advocate change in opinions, run conferences, talk with leaders, visit countries, go around the globe, talk about our presence here, but talk about how nations could help the Christian witness in such a context of oppression that does require courage, compassion, and commitment to love. And by embodying together the values of the kingdom of God and actively working towards the liberation and the empowerment of the oppressed, Christians can make a transformative impact in the challenging and overcoming systems of oppression. Thank you.